In Mexico, archaeological studies of Maya cities continue to reveal secrets about the history and culture of the people who built them and lived there.
There are constant new discoveries being made in the Maya area, and really, of the sites that we've found, we've only excavated 5%.
In the north of the Yucatán Peninsula, the cities of Tulum, Mayapan, and Coba saw the end of the golden age of a civilization that was among the most advanced in the New World.
One of the things that the ancient Maya are best known for is their work as astronomers.
À ce titre, l'orientation des édifices majeurs est quasi systématiquement à mettre en relation avec un phénomène céleste.
From the year 900 of our era, the Maya experienced a period of flourishing cultural and commercial exchanges with all of Mesoamerica. Their edifices, from the more modest to the most imposing, continue to evolve, displaying the skills of Maya builders and the political power of kings who commissioned such monumental works.
L'intention de ça, c'est de te dire, regarde mon temple, c'est immense. Et quand tu es en bas et tu le regardes, tu te sens comme une fourmi.
The analysis of these structures allowed archaeologists to identify the materials and techniques used. From the layout of the core belt vaults to the system of imbrication and piling of the edifices, the experts have pierced all the mysteries of Maya architecture.
Political lords had subjects who owed them corvée service as a form of taxation. So periodically, Maya pyramids would get another construction phase.
Today, technological innovations such as photogrammetry and LiDAR records can reveal what is invisible to understand how the Maya societies functioned and to take into consideration the full extent of their great capitals.
Avec une estimation de 4000 habitants par kilomètre carré, la densité de Mayapan est comparable à celle de Londres à l'heure actuelle.
Maya civilization is as fascinating as it is intriguing. Ahead of its time in many scientific fields, it was also filled with ancestral beliefs and occult rituals.
So they'll punch holes in their earlobe or through their nose, and that royal blood was categorically different than commoner blood.
What did Tulum, Mayapan, and Coba tell us about the last hours of the Maya era? From the Caribbean coast to the heart of the Yucatán jungle, let's take a look back over 1,000 years ago at the discovery of the last Maya cities. Central America is the cradle of Maya civilization, and the Yucatán Peninsula, located in the south of Mexico, can be viewed as the recipient of its last hours. Bordered by the Gulf of Mexico to the north and the Caribbean Sea to the east, it spans over 300 kilometers long and 250 kilometers wide for a surface area of around 70,000 square kilometers, which is similar to the size of a country like Ireland. At the tip of this peninsula, 3 cities experienced the end of the Maya era. Coba, which was a major cultural and religious site until the Spanish conquistadores arrived. Mayapan, the last great Mayan capital. And Tulum, considered as the very last inhabited city since it was only deserted in the 16th century. With different scopes and functions, these 3 cities shared the fact that they all experienced the fall of a civilization that was among the most renowned and oldest of America. Famed for their skills and knowledge in many different fields, such as astronomy, mathematics, agriculture, and art in all its forms, the ancient Maya remain a fascinating people in every respect.
The field of Maya archaeology continues to capture the public as well as academic interest, primarily because it was one of the most literate civilizations in the New World, with their own writing system.
Les Mayas du post-classique écrivaient des livres, ce qu'on appelle les codex. Les codex, malheureusement, ils ont pour leur immense majorité disparu. Un des éléments qui, au contraire, nous est parvenu, c'est l'architecture. Ce sont les ruines des cités, c'est l'agencement des édifices qui permettent, dans une certaine mesure, d'analyser l'évolution politique, l'évolution démographique, l'évolution économique des sociétés mayas au cours des derniers siècles, en fait, de la période précolombienne.
The Maya era lasted around 3,500 years, divided into three great periods. The first period, known as the pre-classic one, which spreads from 2000 BC to 250 AD, when the Maya population became sedentary and founded their first great cities around 1000 BC. The second period of time is the so-called Classic Era, the apex of the Maya civilization. It spans from 250 to 900 AD and saw the imposing cities like Tikal and Palenque rise and disappear. Lastly, the post-classic period from 900 to 1500 AD. This marks a shift for the Maya who migrated towards Yucatán. It was during this time that they founded Tulum and Mayapan, which was their last great capital. The Maya were a people of builders, craftsmen, and merchants, but above all, farmers. Throughout their history, they chose to settle on land where maize farming was favored by fertile land and regular rainfall. This is how, until the Classic period, the Maya settled on a territory that spanned over the current countries of Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Belize, and Mexico. All of this land added up to about 310,000 square kilometers, which is a surface area comparable to that of current Italy.
But at the end of the Classic period, in the southern lowlands, around the 900s AD, the number of political centers collapse.
What actually happens is there's a period of probably drought-driven social disruption in one particular portion of the Maya area. Because when people can't eat, they overthrow their rulerships, they throw them out, and they move out.
And what we see is a rise of settlements toward the coastal zones and in northern Yucatan between 900 and 1000 AD.
Fleeing from bad crops and shortages, the Maya migrated massively towards Yucatán, a region which they very soon viewed as a real El Dorado.
Suite aux sécheresses qui ont marqué la période du classique terminal, la question de l'eau, de sa gestion, de son approvisionnement était primordiale. On ne trouve pas de grands cours d'eau ni de très grands lacs dans le Yucatán. En revanche, on trouve tout un réseau de ce qu'on appelle les cénotes, donc des espèces de puits, de gouffres, de puits naturels qui permettent d'avoir un accès à la nappe phréatique.
There are approximately 7,500 cenotes in Yucatán. These inexhaustible drinkable water sources are the main reason why the Maya settled in Yucatán during the post-classic period. On this vast peninsula, the ultimate traces of the Maya era remain today, vestiges of the last inhabited cities, like Coba, Mayapan, and Tulum. Situated on the east coast of the Yucatán Peninsula, 130 kilometers to the south of Cancun, Tulum is an unmissable archaeological site today for tourists from all over the world. Its closeness to the sea has made it famous, both nowadays and during the post-classic Maya period.
C'est le troisième site plus visité de Mexique. Teotihuacán, Chichen Itza et Tulum.
Cette situation sur une falaise qui domine les eaux turquoises de la mer des Caraïbes, c'est un peu une carte postale pour nous. Mais au-delà de cette image de carte postale, Tulum, c'est aussi un site d'une immense importance économique en réalité, puisque c'est l'accès à la mer et à l'ensemble du réseau commercial côtier pour les sites de l'intérieur des terres.
Perched at 12 meters of altitude on its impressive white limestone cliff, the heart of the city of Tulum is laid out on a rectangular space of 380 meters from north to south and 170 meters from east to west. Its total surface area is a little less than 65,000 square meters, the equivalent to 8 soccer fields.
Alors c'est un site modeste, mais une de ses particularités, c'est la longévité, la durée de son occupation. C'est une des dernières cités mayas occupées. Elle est de fait occupée bien après que les Espagnols mettent le pied sur la péninsule du Yucatán.
Indeed, Tulum was only abandoned at the end of the 16th century. Built during the post-classic period around 1200 AD, the city quickly rose as a strategic place, open onto the world and displaying great cultural diversity. Its architecture draws inspiration from other pre-Columbian civilizations contemporary of the Maya, such as the Zapotecs, the Mixtecs, the Toltecs, and the Aztecs. These people from central Mexico, although almost 1,500 kilometers away, regularly interacted with the Maya from Yucatán.
Donc très logiquement, on trouve à Tulum, comme dans d'autres cités du post-classique, des décorations, des pratiques architecturales, des pratiques artistiques qui répondent à un style qu'on nomme international et qui correspond à ce moment d'échange florissant entre les différentes régions de la Mésoamérique.
Among the architectural codes shared with the Toltecs, for instance, we can see in Tulum many alcoves decorated with bas-relief, or these so-called serpentine columns that highlight the entrance to the main temple.
The influence on the architecture of Tulum is certainly part of an interaction sphere, this wide world of commerce and exchange, of ideology, of elite traders communicating with one another. They were outward looking. They had an international perspective.
This open-mindedness can also be seen in the adoption of shared gods. The most obvious example of which is the feathered serpent god, divinity of resurrection and reincarnation, originally worshipped by the people of central Mexico. The Maya made it their creator god, going by the name of Kukulkan. But the choice of adopting a so-called international religion also concealed a more materialistic goal.
Le culte de ce serpent à plumes, il va pouvoir être partagé par des gens d'horizons très lointains, très différents les uns des autres. Et c'est ce qui va contribuer à la facilité des échanges commerciaux, des différents échanges peut-être matrimoniaux, à la communication en tout cas entre les différentes régions de la Mésoamérique.
The port of Tulum was a hub for trade by the sea. For the great cities located inland, this was the gateway for goods, such as ceramics, jade, and obsidian, a volcanic rock essential to produce stone tools. In exchange, the Yucatán Maya exported their salt, cocoa, and honey. Before reaching Tulum, all of these goods were painstakingly transported by men on their backs along paved stone tracks typical of Maya architecture, called sacbeob. All over Yucatán, these paved roads formed a huge network that connected the great Maya cities between one another. Tulum was one of the final destinations of these terrestrial tradeways that crossed the territory inland. From this port, the goods then traveled by sea towards the north or the south to join the coastal cities of the Gulf of Mexico, or those of the Central American Plateau. These maritime ways enabled cities separated by enemy regions and tribes to trade without having to go through hostile territories.
And I think what is the biggest benefit to coastal trade is that you can simply move much heavier burdens by water, by canoe. You could move much larger loads of goods, much larger distances for less labor investment, and faster.
As such, Tulum was an essential strategic ally for the great Maya cities in Yucatán. In that respect, the city was very quickly considered as a true fortress of tradesmen.
Tulum, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? La ville protégée par une muraille. L'Oum, c'est la terre. Et Tul, c'est protection de cette morceau de terre, voilà.
Tulum is one of the few fortified Maya cities. To protect the main buildings of the city, all gathered inside a 65,000 square meter quadrilateral. A gigantic stone wall was built around it. Its walls were 3 meters thick and about 6 meters tall. They only spanned across 3 sides of the quadrilateral, the fourth wall of the fortress being the limestone cliff that towered at 12 meters high, creating a natural wall on the seaside. All along the fortification, there was a rampart wall and what seemed to be watchtowers.
The wall at Tulum restricts access to the central precinct where the elites lived. And this was probably its primary goal. But there certainly would have been probably guards and controlled entry ports.
If there are markets that are taking place inside that central precinct. One way that you can tax goods that are being distributed through that market system is to be able to control the movement of those goods through the various gates and as a checkpoint. So these walls are complicated. They have a lot of potential functions.
To go through this wall, rare openings were created in the fortification. These were decorated with particular vaults known as corbelled ones, more commonly known as false arches.
La voûte en encorbellement, c'est véritablement un des marqueurs typiques de l'architecture maya. On ne le retrouve pas seulement dans les entrées de Tulum, mais également dans l'immense majorité des constructions mayas.
If people are talking about sort of a false vault versus a true vault, the distinction is the corbelled arch versus the rounded Roman-style arch.
Classic vaults were generally built in semicircles, with stones carved into a truncated pyramid shape. This layout allowed the weight of the construction to be redirected towards the adjacent walls. The vault thus ensured great stability to the edifice it supported. Maya vaults, corbelled arches, did not have this semicircle shape. They were built with blocks of stone stacked on top of each other and slightly shifted, so that the top foundation was systematically overhanging over the lower base. The assembly was simpler as they didn't use wooden supports to withhold the edifice. At the top, one last flat stone rested on both piles that grew closer together, thus creating the final cover. The forces were directed vertically here and weren't redirected towards the side walls. To avoid any instability, the corbelled vault could only cover much narrower openings than those opened by semicircle vaults.
So what you have is a very narrow room, and if you need more internal space, you make another arch next to that, another arch next to that, another arch next to that, and you can build a series of rooms that way.
These narrow and dark inside spaces were not an issue for the Maya. In fact, they were in perfect harmony with their religion, for their temples are the houses of gods.
Et les dieux mayas recherchent l'obscurité, recherchent vraiment ces espaces étroits, en quelque sorte, qui pourraient être assimilés à des grottes.
These were sacred places, and they weren't intended for public view. They were meant for the restricted and privileged few, for lords undergoing initiation ceremonies or conjuring of ancestors or other kinds of communicative rituals with deities.
Maya temples display relatively modest and narrow interior designs. This applies to the main building in Tulum, El Castillo. The temple positioned at the top contains only 2 confined vaulted rooms, 2 little dormers at the back of the building, and 3 openings on the facade separated by 2 columns. From the outside, El Castillo remains monumental, culminating at 24 meters above the Caribbean Sea.
Le Castillo, qui est l'édifice emblématique de Tulum et qui est d'ailleurs en cours de restauration à l'heure actuelle, c'est l'édifice religieux principal de la cité.
C'est le plus haut, c'est là qu'il domine toute la place centrale. C'est de là que les grands chefs ils disaient quoi faire. Qui est-ce qu'on va sacrifier, à qui est-ce qu'on ne va pas sacrifier. Et tout ça, c'est la fonction du temple. Grand endroit pour mettre les personnes importantes de cette petite ville.
El Castillo also served as a landmark for Maya navigators who wanted to gain access to the harbor of Tulum. As such, it had to be built as high up as possible on the cliff. Over the centuries, its architecture evolved as the city grew prosperous and unavoidable. For at the beginning, El Castillo was just a small religious building of very modest proportions.
Le Castillo, comme bon nombre d'édifices monumentaux mayas, est en réalité le fruit d'une succession de modifications architecturales, les unes construites par-dessus les autres.
La transmission des pouvoirs, quelquefois, se fait de père à fils, comme en Europe. Et quand ton père va décéder, et tu es le prochain roi, mais tu ne vas pas détruire le temple de ton papa. Tu vas construire par-dessous. Tu vas les réutiliser, les temples précédents.
Originally, El Castillo in Tulum was already 25 meters wide, but it didn't go much higher than 8 meters. To raise it, The builders added contention walls in the center and an inclined abutment plane at the rear. These additions filled in the central part of the old temple with stone and earth to ensure solid foundations for the extra height. On this base, the new construction rose up to around 12 meters high, adorned with a stairway of about 20 or so steps leading to the sacred part, the temple at the summit. The edifice, decorated with bright colors and numerous sculptures, adopted monumental architecture. Facing the temple, a square-shaped platform of about 10 meters was also built, probably to host dances and religious rituals.
Cet édifice qui a été nommé par les Espagnols Castillo, donc le château, de par sa monumentalité, il est assez caractéristique du style architectural de cette partie du nord du Yucatán qu'on appelle le style côte orientale.
Et la caractéristique, c'est des mini-temples, pas des grands temples, orientés. La façade principale, c'est à l'ouest, parce que de l'est, il vient les cyclones, les ouragans. Les ouragans, ils sont passés même à l'époque des Mayas.
Due to this sometimes hostile coastal climate, edifices were often positioned with their backs to the sea, with only a few openings on the eastern facade. Another characteristic of the East Coast style is its particular aesthetics. Many walls were intentionally inclined towards the outside, giving the building a trapezoid shape, whose flat roofs were decorated with alcoves, sculptures, and moldings.
The East Coast also really embraced the mural tradition. So it's another frustrating thing about the East Coast centers is that the murals have not survived well in the tropical environment, but they would have been resplendently painted and decorated.
If Tulum displays a rather sober style, it is probably because the city was not really a center of power, but a fishing port and a city of merchants above all. Its style contrasts sharply with the one found inland. In the central part of the peninsula, the great political capitals used architecture to display their power. In Mayapan, for example, a monument characterizes in itself the ambition of the city. This is the Pyramid of Kukulkan. With its square base of around 30 meters on each side, it towers up to 15 meters high, which is the equivalent of a 5-floor building. In 1150 AD, the Maya founded a new capital around this majestic edifice, whose political system contrasted radically with the previous periods.
And the goal of the Mayapan elites are to form essentially a confederacy where they are bringing the elites from sites all over the Yucatan Peninsula. You can think of it as a council of rulers who were themselves kings in their own city-states.
Et ce bâtiment à colonnade devant lequel je me trouve, eh bien, c'est justement le siège de ce gouvernement. Et il y a différents aspects dans cet édifice qui nous le montrent. Il y a d'abord ce plan avec cette banquette en C, tout à fait caractéristique de ces structures du conseil, de ces lieux de pouvoir collectif. Il y a également les ornements en bas-relief. On peut encore observer ici, par exemple, 2 jambes qui appartenaient probablement à un des portraits d'un des dirigeants qui siégeait dans ce conseil.
We also have a mat symbol woven into the bench that runs the length of the council house. And the mat symbol is a symbol of Maya royalty, of Maya rulership.
This collegial government made the cult of the feathered serpent god persist. The Great Pyramid is a temple devoted to Kukulkan.
Kukulkan was associated with prosperity and jewels and wealth, so merchants loved him, and he was conceived of as a founder of many Maya political centers throughout Mesoamerica, and so he's a hero.
The Temple of Kukulkan is not a revolution of Maya architecture or of its dimensions, but it bears testimony to the skills of Maya builders. Here, they used building processes proper to their civilization, which allowed them to erect pyramids up to several dozen meters in record timing.
La première chose qu'il faut avoir pour faire la construction de ça, c'est la motivation. Et beaucoup de travailleurs. Beaucoup de travailleurs.
Political lords had subjects who owed them corvée service or obligatory service as a form of taxation.
Chaque famille devait fournir un ouvrier chaque année pour participer à la construction monumentale. Et c'est ainsi qu'il était possible de construire une pyramide telle que le temple de Kukulkan en l'espace de quelques saisons de travail, probablement en moins de 5 ans.
The workforce, often led by priests, was colossal. The workmen extracted and carved the limestone, highly abundant in Yucatán, with simple tools made in obsidian or flint, to very sharp rocks. These blocks of limestone, some of which weighed around 50 kilos, were transported to the work sites in the simplest possible way.
In the Maya area, there were no large beasts of burden. They didn't have cattle or horses or anything like that. So everything was being carried by people, kind of with their hands behind their back and carry things straight up the steps of the temple. So it's all hard manual labor.
The manual labor was exhausting but not very complicated, for the technique to raise such pyramids was surprisingly simple. The structure of a pyramid like the one in Mayapan is made up of backfill of rough stones and mortar. To do so, spaces were divided by walls to create multiple cells. Each group of workmen filled their cells as they pleased with mud, sand, gravel, or lime. It was then entirely covered with a siding of well-carved stones, followed by a mortar coating. This base served as a platform for the upper levels that were built in the same way. Once the edifice was finished, it was covered in whitewash to give it a smooth aspect and make it waterproof. Finally, the pyramid was covered with a new coating with red pigments added to it, giving the building the color of the rising sun.
L'intention de ça, c'est de te dire, regarde mon temple, c'est immense. Ma ville, c'est beaucoup plus importante que la tienne. Et quand tu es en bas et tu les regardes, tu te sens comme une fourmi. En vérité, tu vois, c'est immense.
For the Maya, building such a pyramid was also a way to get closer to the gods with whom they wanted to get in contact. In fact, this obsession with the relationship between the heavens and the earth was a very strong influence on the layouts of edifices.
One of the things that the ancient Maya are best known for is their work as astronomers. They clearly spent literally generations, hundreds of years observing the night sky and understanding that certain objects in the night sky occurred on regular cycles.
They predicted eclipse cycles. They were very concerned with movement of planetary bodies, and how this translates into architectural alignments is an interesting question that archaeoastronomers have identified.
At Mayapan, one major way you see this is that the Temple of Kukulkan is oriented in such a way that at the winter and summer solstice, you get a shadow cast by the corner of the pyramid that runs down the balustrade of the main staircase and forms what looks like a serpent moving down the stairs over time.
This phenomenon clearly marked a privileged moment of connection with the gods. Maya priests studied astronomy for religious reasons, orienting temples in such a way as to make them offerings to the deities supposed to protect them and bring them prosperity. But studying the stars didn't only have this ritual goal.
De fait, de nombreux bâtiments construits par les Mayas sont orientés de telle façon que lorsque le soleil se lève ou bien se couche dans leur axe, cela marque une date importante du calendrier agricole. Et encore une fois, rappelons que les Mayas sont une civilisation d'agriculteurs, et dès lors, la maîtrise des calendriers agricoles est absolument fondamentale, c'est une question de survie.
The Maya managed to decipher the natural cycles of the Earth thanks to a thorough study of the celestial vault. They were then able to make up a disconcertingly precise calendar. In effect, it is composed of two main calendars that make up the calendar wheel. The first one is the religious calendar called Tzolkin. It is made up of a wheel with 20 names of days associated with a wheel of 13 numbers. It counts 260 days divided into 13 periods of 20 days and used for all religious activities. The third wheel represents the second calendar, a solar and civil calendar called Hab. It includes 365 signs representing the 365 days of the cycle of the sun and is divided into 18 months of 20 days each. At the end of the year comes a period of 5 days. This calendar was very useful for farming activities. It is only every 52 years that both calendars realign on the shared starting point. The Maya called this period of 52 years the cycle of the Pleiades.
Je ne sais pas si vous savez, mais les Mayas ils sont inventés les calendriers parfaits.
Perfect indeed, because the Maya had understood that a sidereal year, which is the time the Earth takes to go around the sun, is actually 365 days and 6 hours. Although our Gregorian calendar sorts this out with a leap year every 4 years, the Maya astronomers compensated this slight gap at the end of each cycle of the Pleiades.
À la fin de cette période de 52 ans, on va fêter 13 jours. 13 jours de fête.
With these 13 days of celebrations added every 52 years, the correction of the Maya calendar matches precisely the one we do every 4 years nowadays.
C'est la seule civilisation qui faisait la correction del calendrier. Et c'est pour ça que dans le calendrier maya, chaque date elle est précise.
The Maya priesthood during the post-classic was intensely interested in controlling the calendar. Like they would divine when were good days to plant, when were good days to hunt, good days for making war, good days to name children, and so on. And the people occupying those positions were influential in politics.
In the post-classic period, Mayapan was the epicenter of the Maya world. Consequently, the entire city was organized around its main temple, viewed as the center of the cosmos. Around the pyramid of Kukulkan, the heart of the city was home to all the religious and administrative buildings of Mayapan. To the west, the Temple of Venus. To the east, the Caracol, devoted to the wind god, and the complex dedicated to the god of rain, Cha'ak. To the north, the Temple of Warriors, the Temple of Painted Alcoves, the Temple of Fishing, and the Northwest Temple. In the middle of all these places of worship came the residences of the ruling class. Already densely packed, this main square only represented a tiny part of what the city of Mayapan was at its peak.
Suite à l'abandon de Mayapan autour de 1450, la jungle a repris ses droits et recouvert peu à peu l'ensemble de la cité. Seule, en réalité, une infime partie a été dégagée et est aujourd'hui mise à disposition des visiteurs. Elle ne représente véritablement que peut-être 5 à 10% de ce qu'était la cité à la période de son apogée.
Thanks to laser teledetection technology, archaeologists managed to reveal what was invisible. In recent years, they discovered to what extent the city spread out far beyond its political and religious center.
In 2013, we performed a LiDAR survey that allowed us to map all the houses located under the forest around Mayapan within a 40 square kilometer area.
So what we're doing is we're flying over the jungle canopy and we're sending down millions of pulses of laser light into the jungle. And most of those will hit leaves and trees, but a bunch of those will manage to get between the leaves, hit the real ground surface, and bounce back. And then we can digitally, literally just hit a button and delete all the vegetation. And all you see is what's at that bare ground surface.
And to our surprise, we realized that this area was completely covered in house mounds and outlying minor political centers.
We were able to look at a complete map that show us all the architecture, the stone walls, trails, cenotes, all of that. And It 100% changed the way we were doing archaeology at Mayapan.
LiDAR technology allowed archaeologists to confirm the existence of an 8-kilometer-long surrounding wall, inside of which more than 4,000 structures were recorded on a surface area of hardly more than 4 square kilometers.
It's dense and it's walled, and there clearly was a concern for defense. This was a contentious period, and there were rivals, and warfare and raids were a part of the political landscape in the post-classic.
So you have both an external defense and a way to keep an eye on the local population who might, want to rise up and cause you problems. Again, city walls are more complicated, I think, than a lot of people give them credit for.
Although it was fortified, Mayapan took up a hierarchical organization of space specific to Maya civilization. In the center of the city, the religious edifices and housing of upper classes coexisted, whereas the rest of the population was organized around this nerve center. The first ring around it was where the merchants and craftsmen lived. Then came the farmers who lived the furthest out of the city. What the 2013 LiDAR study revealed is that the city spread far beyond the surrounding wall.
The city itself spans 4.2 square kilometers within the wall, and then it goes another ½ kilometer in all directions outside the wall. So stand on the top of the Temple of Kukulkan as far as the eye can see, and that will be Mayapan, the residential zone of one of the most urban cities ever to have existed in the Maya realm.
We had originally had a population estimate of 12,000 based on existing maps of Mayapan. Now that we have the LiDAR, it looks like maybe 20,000 or 25,000. So it's been absolutely critical in our understanding of the city.
Although Mayapan is considered to be the last great political capital of the Yucatán Maya, the essential cultural and religious center of the post-classic period remains Coba. The city is 200 kilometers to the east of Mayapan and about 50 or so kilometers northwest of Tulum. Its ruins, today shrouded in thick tropical rainforest, was revealed by archaeologists in the 1920s.
Coba is a wonderful city in part because it was so long-lived. You see the first occupation there in probably about 100 AD, and it had time to develop, both size and scale.
It probably had 50,000 people in its height.
Around 650 AD, Coba was the most important city of the Yucatan Peninsula, a major political and religious capital. But from the year 1000 AD on, its influence declined severely with the rise in power of its rival, Chichen Itza.
Néanmoins, Coba, après cette période un peu troublée, va renaître de ses cendres en quelque sorte pour connaître un apogée post-classique qui se manifeste en particulier avec de nouvelles constructions monumentales.
These new complexes were erected around 1200 AD and display all the architectural codes typical of the East Coast style. Small rectangular constructions, narrow vaulted rooms, and very few openings bordered by columns and decorated with ornamental friezes. The presence of such ensembles confirms the thesis of a renewal in Coba at the time. On this huge site of 70 square kilometers, which is twice the surface area of a city like Lyon in France, these modest buildings brush shoulders with the imposing pyramid temples of the previous period.
So you've got different architectural styles that are present, right? So you see sort of classic period tall vertical temples that then are topped by post-classic Tulum-style shrines to reflect the changing times.
This little temple that towers over the canopy is at the summit of the highest edifice in Yucatan, the Pyramid of Nohok Mul. It stands on 7 levels with rounded sides and measures 42 meters high. The stairway leading to the top counts 113 steps, and its slope is famous for being particularly steep and difficult to climb. In Mayan language, Nohok Mul means Great Hill. In the scenery, this pyramid has the appearance of a craggy cliff dominating the jungle, and it's exactly what the Maya wanted when they built such a huge temple.
The ideology ties very closely to the cosmology, the idea that there's an upper world and there's an underworld and that we're somewhere in the middle of it. And there's various ways to reach the gods who live in the upper world. One of those is to ascend a mountain. So in the Yucatán, where it's relatively flat, building your own mountain is one way to get a mountain.
And it was from the top of this sacred artificial mountain, visible by all, that the Maya priests and kings ran the city.
Les pyramides mésoaméricaines, elles permettent une mise en scène de la politique et de la religion. C'est vraiment une scène de théâtre. On a d'une part le temple au sommet de la pyramide, qui pour un observateur situé en bas est un espace un petit peu mystérieux. Là, les gouvernants, les prêtres vont s'adonner à un certain nombre de rituels dans l'obscurité. Et puis il y a d'autre part le grand escalier frontal qui lui permet au contraire des apparitions tout en majesté où on domine la foule qui peut être amassée au pied de la pyramide.
Maya kings were divine messengers, the only ones who could interact with the gods and obtain their favors. During periods of drought and famine, their political legitimacy could very quickly be questioned. To preserve it, leaders had to use propaganda constantly. This is what the many stelae found all over the city revealed. Highly eroded today, most of them are very difficult to interpret in the naked eye. Archaeologists often use photogrammetry to create a more legible version of these testimonies in 3 dimensions. By assembling hundreds of photos taken in the field, this technique amplifies all the reliefs of a sculpted scene and reveals the invisible.
Et dans le cas de cette stèle de Coba, on observe un portrait royal avec le dirigeant représenté en majesté, vêtu de ses plus beaux atours, d'un panache de plumes flamboyantes. Et surtout, on observe qu'il est juché, qu'il piétine littéralement 2 captifs en position d'humiliation. Il y en a un ici et l'autre là. Et puis il y a un 3e captif, les bras attachés dans le dos. Donc on est véritablement sur, encore une fois, un programme de communication politique, de propagande royale.
These prisoners of war could at any moment be sacrificed as offerings to the Maya gods. Nobody knows how often the temples were used as stages to these macabre scenes. Yet once again, the architecture of the place informs the experts about their unfolding and the places where the ceremonies occurred.
Et l'un de ces emplacements de sacrifice humain se trouve ici derrière moi. C'est sur ces monolithes que les victimes à sacrifier étaient maintenues par des assistants. Et puis l'officiant venait perforer l'abdomen pour retirer le cœur. Alors cette mise à mort qui est rapide pouvait être suivie de la décapitation de la victime sacrificielle. Ce sacrifice humain, c'était bien entendu le sacrifice ultime qui permettait de s'assurer de la bienveillance des divinités, mais c'était encore une fois, il faut bien insister là-dessus, aussi un spectacle public qui est à placer dans ce contexte politique violent, troublé, de règne de la terreur en quelque sorte, mise en place par les familles dirigeantes. C'est une démonstration ostensible du pouvoir.
These sacrifices of prisoners were not the only blood offerings which the Maya people attended to. Self-sacrifice rituals were also very frequent. Perched on their pyramid, the Maya kings or priests practiced spectacular bleedings on themselves.
So they'll punch holes in their earlobe or through their nose or into the fleshy parts of their penis, things like that. They would obviously have been very painful. So it was a real commitment on the part of the elites as well. And that royal blood was categorically different than commoner blood.
These blood offerings were directly connected to the myth of rebirth, and their goal was to ensure fertile crops for the people. As proof, this bas-relief represents a decapitated victim from which a long plant is growing, loaded with fruit and flowers. The victim bears all the attributes of a Maya pelota player: This traditional ball game, widespread in Mesoamerica, took place on courts built in stone, some of which are still almost intact today. In the one in Coba, a stone skull marks the center of the playing area.
On trouve de très nombreux terrains qui sont ornés de crânes humains ou de bas-reliefs représentant des personnes décapitées. Alors, on évoque parfois que les joueurs de l'équipe perdante, tout simplement le capitaine de l'équipe perdante, ait pu être sacrifié à l'issue de la partie, même si, encore une fois, aucune source écrite ne permet de le confirmer. Ce qu'on observe, c'est une corrélation réelle entre la pratique du jeu et le sacrifice humain. Ça, c'est certain.
The ball court, whose size varies according to cities, is rectangular. It is bordered by walls, often inclined, going up to 10 meters high approximately. At the top of each of these walls, a particularly inaccessible ring serves as a goal. During this ritual game, two teams of 2 to 7 players faced off and exchanged a rubber ball that could weigh up to 3 kilos. To do so, they were not allowed to use their hands and feet. The contact area seemed to be the hip.
Il s'agissait très probablement, un peu à l'instar du tennis ou du volleyball, de pousser son adversaire à la faute, soit en l'empêchant de renvoyer la balle, soit en le forçant à renvoyer la balle hors des limites du terrain.
Many of the ball courts have large ball court rings, so it seems like if the ball went through the ring, you automatically won. It was a one-off situation. It wasn't like they were scoring points by repeatedly getting the ball through the ring. If it got up there, that was a good sign that the gods were pleased with you and that was it. You were done.
Surely ball players would have been heroes who sacrificed themselves. So there was probably a gladiatorial aspect. There needed to have been a winner, and the price needed to be the ultimate price.
The people watched these battles from the top of the stands, above the players. In the representation of the universe as the Maya conceived it, the ball-playing court constituted a passage towards the world of the dead. Its rounded shape and the presence of sculptures of skulls and supernatural beings in the construction leave no doubt for the experts.
It's definitely an access point to the underworld, a cleft in the earth so that you are going down to the realm of the Lords of Death.
This underworld was not considered to be like the hell that some other religions envision. In this respect, the Maya people were not afraid of it. They saw it as both the place where water comes from, a source of life, but also the place where their deceased ancestors lived. The Maya devoted a highly particular cult to caves and cenotes, the natural geological formations found abundantly in the area.
When you see the formations, the stalactites, the stalagmites, when you see the flow stones, especially if you imagine them being lit by torchlight and campfires, it's the kind of place when you think, well, where would the gods live? And you've been down there, that's a pretty good choice. They're so impressive and they're so intimidating that it makes absolute sense to me as a researcher why the Maya consider them sacred and important.
Although the end of the Maya era is often attributed to the Spanish conquest, the historical truth is a little more complex. On October 12, 1492, Christopher Columbus first set foot on the American continent. But it wasn't until March 1517 that the Spanish reached the Yucatán Peninsula. When they reached Maya land, they found a civilization that was already declining. Power was no longer centralized in Mayapan, which had already been deserted for several decades.
Mayapan collapsed around 1450 AD as a result of political revolt led by members of its internal council. So the Confederacy dissolved, and at this point, every lord went back to their home territory.
Une grande partie de la population part s'installer dans d'autres cités nouvellement créées, mais aucune n'atteindra jamais l'ampleur, le degré de contrôle qu'avait Mayapan sur l'ensemble de la région.
On peut dire que c'est la dernière capitale de la péninsule de Yucatán.
When the Spanish conquistadors invaded the areas inland, the great Coba was also unoccupied. Tulum, however, remained inhabited until 1544, when the Spanish spread their conquest to the northeast of the peninsula. Thousands of Maya were killed or forced to flee the cities they had founded. Never again would they build cities like Tulum. The heyday of the Yucatán Maya ends here, in this small harbor city that managed to survive over the years and eras to become the last city of the Maya era. However, this great civilization is still very much alive today.
Et quand une personne me dit c'est vrai que les Mayas sont disparus, la réponse est non. Il y a entre Guatemala, Belize, Honduras et Salvador environ de 14 millions de Mayas encore, avec les ADN Maya. Ils parlent Maya, ils pratiquent leur religion. C'est une résistance culturelle.
It's an incredibly resilient culture. They've been through severe droughts and things over the years to the point where entire cities have fallen and new ones have been formed. And they always have found a way to reorganize, to adapt, and to survive.
For anthropologists and archaeologists alike, the investigation work is only just beginning.
Nous sommes encore très loin d'avoir tout compris à la civilisation maya. Même après des siècles et des siècles d'exploration, des décennies de fouilles archéologiques sur des dizaines de sites, on a encore énormément de questions auxquelles répondre.
Of the sites that exist, we've probably found 5%. Of the sites that we've found, we've only excavated 5%. And as the technology advances, there are constant new discoveries being made in the Maya area, and really it's a fascinating place to work, and we're going to be learning more about the ancient Maya for many years to come.
Tulum, Mayapan, Coba. These three cities were the home to the last moments of the apex of this civilization that is as fascinating as it is mysterious. The architectural and cultural testimony that they leave is a synthesis of the beliefs, knowledge, and skills of the Maya people. The achievement of around 4,000 years of existence and evolution in the Central American forest. If the Maya haven't totally disappeared today, it's also thanks to the longevity of these vestiges of limestone, whose beauty is universal and eternal.